Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the BFI Film Academy Labs, programmed by the Young Film Programmers Network in conjunction with BFI Film Hub Southeast. I'm your host, Nicole Davis. These sessions are designed for 16 to 25-year-olds to gain industry insight and get professional advice and support to develop their own film programming and filmmaking practices. In terms of how this particular session is going to run, I'll be speaking to our panelists for roughly 35 to 40 minutes, and then there will be a chance for you to ask questions at the end, so please don't be shy. Put them in the Q&A section at the bottom and not the chat box, and then I'll be selecting some questions from there. We have live captioning today, so if you'd like to access that, please use the captions button also at the bottom of the screen. But now I'm going to introduce our esteemed panelists. First up, Jack Casey. Jack Casey is a London-based script editor, producer, and new talent consultant. He's worked in talent development for BAFTA, BFI Network, and the BBC, and as a reader for companies including BBC Writers' Room, Film London, and Short Circuit. He has developed a wide range of short films that have screened in competition at festivals including Sundance, South by Southwest, and the BFI London Film Festival, and have been BAFTA and BIFA nominated. He is currently script editing on features in development with companies including Netflix, BFI, BBC Film and Screen Island, alongside several TV projects. Hello, Jack.
And have I been called esteemed before?
First time for everything. And finally, Lily Slydel. Lily is an experienced story developer, currently working as development editor at indie production company Greenacre Films and as a script editor on the 2022 Channel 4 Screenwriting Talent Scheme. Lily started their career in development and acquisitions at production company and film financier New Sparta Films before moving to the BFI, where they were associate producer on the Born Digital Short Film Collection. Lily has a script development diploma from the NFTS and attended the 2019 Torino Film Lab as a story editor, and alongside their work in development has produced short films that have screened at BAFTA and Oscar qualifying film festivals. Hello, Lily.
Hello.
I'm so excited to have you both here. Yeah, I think I tweeted earlier that you are two of my favorite people in the film industry, not just for the work that you do, but how you go about the work that you do. And so I'm really excited to dig into your roles as script editors and what exactly that entails. So to kick things off, I'd love to get a sense of how you arrived at the film industry. How did you get into it? And at what point did you discover that script editing was something that you wanted to pursue? Jack, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Kind of by chance. When I finished school, I was working in the Showroom bar in Sheffield. Showroom is the cinema where Sheffield Doc Fest takes place, a few other film festivals as well. And was just talking to a customer who was looking for an intern for a company in an industry, didn't know what, and kind of for want of anything else to do, threw my hat in the ring, and it turned out to be a film company called Life Size Pictures, which at the time managed the UK Film Council's short funding schemes, which was kind of the previous iteration before the lottery money moved to the BFI. And they also ran the Virgin Media Shorts competition. So I kind of went in as an intern and kind of stuck around for a few years working on the Virgin Media Shorts, reading a lot of scripts, kind of doing every odd job around the office. But I remember the first opportunity I had to write a set of notes was on two drafts of a script that were very different. Kind of one was set in the 1950s, I think, and the new draft had moved the story to present day. And kind of getting stuck into kind of the differences between those two drafts is something I didn't know could be a job, and that was kind of my first taste of what a script editing and development career might look like. Does that answer the question? I'm not sure.
It does, and we'll see if Lily can do better. No, I won't pit you against each other. But Lily, how did you get into the film industry?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up being a kind of raging attention seeker and desperately wanted to be on stage at every available opportunity. So my poor family was subjected to endless watching me kind of create meaningless art for a really, really long time throughout my childhood. And that grew into wanting to be an actor. And then I got to university to study theatre, and I realized I just wasn't that good. And I really loved storytelling, and I really loved characters, and I was kind of fascinated by why people behave the way they do. And so I was doing this theatre degree, and then I ended up doing a film module because I was like, oh, I wonder what that's like. And the grades jumped up significantly. So I then was like, okay, maybe this is something I should explore. And then once I left uni, I think I kind of had a range of like odd jobs doing different things. I managed to kind of do a little bit of work as a runner in, not even in kind of a film and TV production company, but an ad agency. So was kind of in the production sphere, and what had quite a few years of admin experience throughout kind of jobs that I'd had at uni. And I managed to hear of someone whose parent was setting up a film production company. And I found their second name through Facebook, and I found them on LinkedIn. I sent them a message and I was like, can I send you my CV? And I sent them my CV and it didn't go through. And then I chased and she was like, it didn't come through properly. And so I sent it again. And then I basically just harassed her until she hired me as a PA to the three heads of department there, which was business affairs, the kind of managing director, and development and acquisitions. And so I was there for kind of 3 years at New Sparta, and what started out as kind of PA, kind of just general admin across everything, became more and more script reading and more getting stuck in. And, you know, I think I was really nervous to begin with, because I think it's quite hard to sometimes talk to writers. And at that company, we were working with very well established writers, and so I was very much working under someone, and I felt like, you know, nervous about it. But I quickly came to realize that I was like, God, you're allowed to get like fully immersed in this world, and you can sit in a room and talk for hours and hours about characters which are just people, like all day. And so for me, nosiest person in the world, it was perfect.
I think both of your parts, like those circuitous, kind of demonstrate this idea that it doesn't matter if you're not doing exactly the job that you want to be doing in the long run. Like they'll teach you kind of understanding of things such as story, such as character, just how the industry works. Like there's no such thing, I don't think, as like a useless job in the film industry. Like it will teach you something, even if it's just, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Lily, I know in terms of kind of getting into script development more, you studied at the NFTS, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit as to kind of why you wanted a qualification in it.
Sure. So after I did kind of 3 years at this indie company, I was made redundant, unfortunately, and I had to get another job because, you know, I live in London and rent's got to be paid. And so I took a job that was in a slightly tangential area in the film industry. And I was really lucky that I had a really wonderful boss, and like there were lots of things to love about the job, but it wasn't in development. And I was, you know, getting nervous because it was hard to find another development job, because I was sitting in that space that was a little bit too experienced to be an assistant, but not experienced enough to be the next level up. And so I was losing out on jobs to kind of people, getting down to the last couple, and I was really starting to like lose heart. I was doing a lot of script reading for loads of different companies, and that was kind of really supplementing my income. And then I was like, okay, how do I cross over into proving that I have enough for them to take the risk for me to be the step up? And so I was like, right, the NFTS course will help kind of bolster what I'm currently lacking in the other area. And so started the course with hope of it doing that, and it really did. It was really useful in lots of ways, and there was a lot of merit that came for kind of when I was then in more development situations, being like, you know, if I couldn't fall back on what I was talking about in my day job, I could be like, but I'm also doing this, and I'm also script reading. And I had, you know, a range of things. And as you were just saying, Nicole, it's like everyone has wiggly parts in film. And so it was just another part of experience that really helped me.
Absolutely. And then Jack, I'll come to you on this first, but script reading is just an essential aspect of the job, and often that is something that maybe you can do first to kind of gain experience, you know, be a freelance script reader. How would you advise aspiring script editors to get their foot in the door, to kind of start reading for production companies on that basis?
It's a very good question. I think sorry, my cat is screaming at my door to be let in, so if anyone can hear him, I apologize. I think there's a two-part answer to that, which is first kind of the importance of a distinction between script reading and script editing.
Yeah.
In that, like, reading is kind of the first stage in the process, are where you're most likely reading for a producer or series of producers about the viability of a project and whether it's worth investing in the development of it, versus script editing, which is then that development process. So they're kind of two steps on a journey, but not always the same thing and not always looking for the same thing in script. So it is in itself reading a specific skill set that you kind of have to train yourself on. This is advice that I abhor other people giving, but what I honestly did is I did it for free for a while, which, you know, I don't want to encourage anyone to do because it's terrible that people have to do that, but I did. For any producers who needed a reader for like a nominal fee or no money at all, I would read the book they wanted read to see if it was worth adapting, or the feature they wanted to commission but hadn't had time to read themselves, or whatever it was. I would do that work because it was a credit on a CV that was, I was also on a very wiggly path I was working in film festivals for a long time. So it was an opportunity for me to say, somebody trusts my instinct on scripts. You give me an opportunity now. And then that did lead to opportunities with organizations. I don't know that that's the best or most viable route for people, and maybe Lily, you have a better opinion on getting there.
I had a really similar experience, I suppose, because I had been part of a company where development became part of my title. I did have a slightly easier time after being made redundant, that I then could go to places and be like, well, you know, these people paid me to read, so they, you know, they know. But I do think there are several different ways that you can read as well. Like there is reading for development and acquisitions, which is kind of reading books and doing summaries, which takes a lot of time, but I would say is a different skill. And I would argue that you don't need quite the same level of reading experience in order to be able to do that, because essentially they really just need someone to condense the book. But I think the more you get used to doing that, the quicker you get with scripts then as well. But I did a lot of reading for distributors, actually, rather than people looking to take on projects, because while I'd read for development, I'd also read for acquisitions. So I was used to reading the end product and assessing based on the package that it came with, which, you know, kind of was looking at it holistically and being like, is this a good investment? And that maybe comes a little bit later down the line. But I think some of the easiest ways, from what I gather, into kind of reading are reading for script reading competitions. I know places like Triforce, BAFTA Rowcliffe, they get such an enormous amount of submissions that once you've maybe done a couple of free ones for other places, maybe that's quite a good way to bolster your CV, because they just have such an enormous amount of incoming that they can't possibly get through it, and they do need readers. So I try that.
Yeah, that's a really good shout. And I really value the kind of distinction between script reading and script editing, because I think script editing is a role that is just a bit nebulous. Not every project has a script editor. Not everyone kind of knows what that role is. So I'd love to dig deeper and ask you what you think the function of a script editor is. You know, what is it you're there to do?
Who wants to go first?
There's a kind of Ponzi answer to that, which I actually think has a lot of truth in it, which is that the script editor's job is to make the script more like itself, which is, you know, a bit abstract and nebulous, like the role. But I think that there's some truth to that I think speaks to kind of what the skill set is, that it's about kind of holding a project tight and protecting it against all the forces that can make making work impossible and making good work harder than impossible, and using all of your story knowledge and all of your skill to kind of shepherd that kind of perfect vision of the project through the process, which is the kind of, you know, grandiose version of what it is, but it's also a lot of admin. You know, I don't know, Lily, do you think that that's an accurate representation of it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the words that I've kind of put down is it's as a protector. I think, you know, as a protector to the project and also to the writer, I think sometimes it can be really, really difficult for writers to hear very difficult criticism. So sometimes you act as a sort of barricade to take the first wave of constructive criticism that might not be phrased as gently as it should be. And then you soften it and you know, digest it for the writer. And also, I think, you know, you add your own creative insights and you work with them with all of the story skills that you kind of have and be like, okay, how does this work? But I think a lot of the time, writers who work alone find it hard to distinguish between what is in their head still and what's actually on the page, because they're connecting all those dots. And so they're going, of course, this makes sense. You know all of this, because they do. But then when you've got someone new who comes in, I think, with like a loving eye and goes, you know, there's lots of great stuff here, but like, I'm missing certain bits. We're going A, C, we've lost B.
Yeah.
I think that's a kind of big part of it. And yeah, as well as kind of protecting the story, I think protecting the writers, because I think a lot of the time it's very emotionally draining to be a writer, particularly when you generate a lot. And then within a TV context, I would say a huge part of it is acting as a kind of barrier, or kind of conduit rather, between the executives who commission and the writers, and helping them process that. And then there's production script editing, which is a whole different thing.
Yeah, I think there's also like a platonic version of the process where you join a project before the writer has ever received a set of notes on their script, and they're kind of feeling vibrant and excited and ready to kind of take on the world with it. And there's the reality where often you come in later in the process where they have had a really hard set of notes from an exec, or a producer has pulled out because of X and Y, and they're maybe feeling a bit deflated and feeling like people don't understand the story they're trying to tell or the work that they want to make. Or they have had a bad experience with another script editor. And you kind of then have to come in and be the kind of rejuvenating force to get everyone excited about the project again, to demonstrate that somebody can be excited about this piece of work, and to kind of get the ball rolling again towards a kind of achievable goal.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And I think we've kind of touched on some of the skills required in terms of being a good communicator, being quite patient, but I'm wondering if there's anything else that you think is kind of really vital to being a good script editor. Lily, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, you've obviously got to have strong creative instincts and like a massive love of story. I think those are like kind of really foundational. But I would, and I mean, I think it sounds quite arrogant to say when you're in the role, but I do think you have to be quite emotionally intelligent, because I think you have to be able to adapt to situations and also sometimes take quite a lot on and work out how much should be given and how much, you know, my approach to development is very, very open and very like emotional, I suppose. I kind of share a lot and hear a lot, but some people really don't want that. So you have to be able to gauge when they do and don't want that, and how best to sort of get around it. So I'd say like kind of a lot of it is people management.
Yeah, I think it's empathy is the most important thing, and not to sound like people who refer to themselves as empaths, you know, usually just psychopaths. But, you know, I think that there is an importance of being an empathetic person, because somebody's asking you to like love their child as much as they love it, you know. And if you can't get on board with their vision and their passion, you're not going to be able to help them, I don't think. And yes, you're right, Lily, that there are definitely people who don't want that, but most people, I think, do want it to be like a holistic, organic, emotional process, because writing is emotional.
Yeah,
writers are emotional people.
I think also it's important to recognize when you, and this maybe comes when you've been in it for a bit longer and you are able to say no to work and projects, is working out when you're not the right person for the job, because sometimes you're just not, and that's okay. Sometimes, like, you know, you don't like everyone in the world, and so sometimes I won't be the right script editor for the right writer, and that's like a perfectly fine thing to notice and acknowledge. And I think having a reasonably thick skin, they say, with a thin skin, is helpful, because I think sometimes it can feel, you know, like you really want them to like you and you want to get on, but sometimes you just have to be like, this isn't the right thing and this isn't about me.
So that's what makes you a good script editor. On the flip side, what makes someone good to work with? Or to frame it differently, how can someone or a writer come to you kind of at their most prepared to get the most out of their sessions with you? Jack, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, I have several thoughts. I'll start with one. I think, you know, kind of going back to that ideal version of what the journey would look like, you know, would be people who invite you into the process kind of at the right stage. And you're therefore along for the ride as a collaborator. And I think people who see their script editors as their collaborators usually get more out of them than the kind of alternative, which you often experience, where things have gone a bit wrong and the latest draft isn't really working and no one can quite figure out why. And there's like 4 sets of notes from 4 different people all feeding in. And, you know, the draft's supposed to lock in like a week, or the shoot's in a month, and they're a bit screwed. And then you come in as a service provider to kind of unpick all the bad work, or the work that hasn't worked. And that's less fulfilling, but I also think it's not like very good use of the skill set. So I think the more people think about the need of a script editor on kind of every project that they're going to undertake, the better the work will be. I think that's an important thing, you know, budget for one, plan for one, find one that you like to work with. What else? Lily, do you have any thoughts?
I think there were lots of things that kind of came to mind, I suppose, if we're thinking about writers, about what makes writers good to work with. And I was like, God, there's so many ways. And I think for me, I'm really excited when a writer is inquisitive and they're really like interested in exploring. I think the hardest thing to work with is when you find someone, for all the reasons that Jack says, there can be a myriad of reasons that someone is stuck. But when someone is stuck, it's hard. And whether it's stuck as a kind of personality trait or stuck circumstantially is very different. But like people who are kind of naturally a bit more rigid, it's definitely harder to work with. But there are, you know, differences in approach. I think I'm excited by, people who are inquisitive and open. But also I'm a really big fan of when, and not all writers will have this because a lot of them, I've worked with a lot of new writers, but when they have quite a good awareness of what their needs are in a situation and what their boundaries are. Like when someone can go, oh, no, actually that isn't how I work. Like this, sending me more than a page of notes, not gonna work. I'm like, great, you know that, wonderful, because that kind of speeds things up a little bit because you'll work that out, but it's just really nice if you don't have to make the mistake first.
Yes, that is a very good point, because I like to be as flexible as possible for writers, and I will always make notes for myself, you know, kind of on things that I'm feeling about a project, but kind of whether I turn them into a 5-page document or a kind of half-day chat is kind of down to the writer and what's going to work for them. I do think also producers can approach script editors well or badly. And that again can be the kind of bringing people on late, but it can also be misunderstanding kind of the breadth of a script editor's potential contribution to a project. So if you come in and it's just about, we've locked locations, we've locked budget, we've cast this, it's not working, you can't take anything out or put anything in, fix it. That's a very producerly thing, but it's not really great for a writer, and they could have benefited from a script editor sooner. But I also think that the word editor is sometimes misleading in that it's not a purely technical editorial role. I can go through your script with a red pen, but that's not kind of the most useful thing. And you'll receive a lot of scripts from producers who maybe think that you can teach a screenwriter all the things they would have got if they'd gone to film school and didn't. And sometimes even the things they never learned when they were there. And I don't think hiring a script editor is a kind of quick tonic for not knowing how to write a screenplay. Because I can tell you, and you know, it's stuff I find fun to a degree, like I can tell you what a character intro should look like, how to write your action lines, all that kind of thing. But we're going to have a finite amount of time together. And if the conversation is purely technical and we never really get into your story, it's a bit of a wasted opportunity.
Yeah. And it's also not a good use of money for producers to do that. Like, yeah, it is interesting. I think there is so much potential when you use a script editor, which is I'm very fortunate that I work at a really wonderful company with really great, really flexible producers, and I work in-house on projects from like pretty much the get-go. And then, you know, there are some projects, because we've got quite a big slate, that we hire in other script editors to work on when, you know, it's to do with kind of bandwidth and who's best suited to certain things. But it means that I'm part of the conversations from very early on. And it means that I have kind of quite a clear idea about what it is that we're trying to achieve. And I think quite a lot of the time, what some of the problems come in the fact that sometimes what the writer thinks that they are doing and what the producer thinks that the writer is going to do are two entirely different things. And then that makes for a very difficult job. And it's, you know, it's not impossible, but then at some point someone has to make a very big compromise about what the film is that they're making. And those conversations should be had from the beginning. And that's not to say that having a script editor on board will prevent these problems arising. Like, I think, yeah, as Jack was saying, like there is no kind of tonic, and like using script editors like that isn't going to work, because it's, you know, part of a team, and there are many people who make a film, and a script editor is kind of one part of it. But I do think they can be a very valuable resource, and it can be really fun when done the right way.
Continuing that thread of working in-house, Lydia, I'm wondering if you can speak to kind of maybe the advantages of working for a company as opposed to freelance, and then Jack will come on to you about working freelance.
I mean, so the kind of obvious one is that I'm employed full time, like and that's a really nice, comfortable thing to have. I think there's lots of really great things about it. You get a real wide range of things that you work on. I get to work across TV and film. I get to see projects throughout a really long period of their lifespan. I get, lots of things from being in-house. I suppose one of the challenges that come with being in-house is that you work for producers. So sometimes you work on projects that are not to your personal taste. But I think that is like a really important muscle to flex. And I think that, you know, if you only worked on projects that were exactly your favorite type of film, you wouldn't be a very good script editor, because you'd actually just be talking about what you want from a story, rather than being able to be a flexible thing that can work with all different types of story. And I think, that's a really wonderful thing, as I get to work across a lot of genres, kind of all within the same week. And there are some that we kind of don't do, and some that we do more of. But yeah, there are, I mean, things that I would love, I imagine, about being freelance, about being able to really concentrate on one for a really intense period of time and then kind of put it to bed and move on, which I'd love, but also, lots of great things about being in-house.
Jack, why did you choose the freelance life, or why did the freelance life
chose me? Yeah, it did. Oh, it did. I was dead set on being a commissioner. That was always in my mind, that's what I was going to do. But I could never get a development job anywhere. So, couldn't start the journey. But people would let me script edit for them. Or people would let me give them a set of notes in exchange for a credit on their short, that kind of thing, and start that ball rolling. But still, I was adamant for a very long time that I wanted to be an exec, I wanted to be a commissioner. Until I kind of got to see commissioners and execs in action, and realized that it wasn't the best use of my skills at all. And I admire a lot of execs that I've known and worked with, but this may not be true of all, I don't wish to generalize, but I've seen a lot of execs who've never been able to get like really deep into a project. It has to remain quite surface level because they have so many. And I do like to really delve into a project and kind of immerse myself in it as much as the writer is, and spend time with it and kind of carry it with me. And being freelance has allowed me to do that more and more. And kind of the minute I stopped focusing on trying to get an in-house job, my freelance career took off massively. And I would like the comfort of being sort of gainfully employed. I really enjoy getting to work with a wide range of people. And I agree about not just working on stuff that's entirely your taste, but I do like that I am at a point where I can start to choose what I do say no to, because I think I probably have been guilty in the past of working on projects I'm not necessarily passionate about or a good match for, just for the, kind of the sheer need of a credit, you know. But sort of building my professional reputation with a mix of filmmakers in a freelance capacity, I can make active decisions about my career now.
Yeah.
What
you're
saying,
oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say, sticking with this idea of freelance, and I'm trying to roll in an audience question here along with one of my own, so bear with me while I do this. But someone's asked kind of how you get work when you're first starting out. So I'm wondering, how did you go about getting work in order to build that reputation? And is that true of how you get work now, or has that evolved?
I definitely, again, networking is like the most, when people say just network, you know, I reject that, because networking is a horrible thing that nobody wants to do. But the reality is that a lot of the shorts I've worked on, I met the writers at film festivals or at networking drinks, and kind of not with a particular eye for networking, but for meeting like-minded people in the industry and building a kind of group of peers, and then ended up working with them. And being excited about the projects that they were working on and saying, you know, I'd love to read the script. If I give you a set of notes, will you give me a credit? All of that kind of thing, which is transactional, and you have to be careful about, you know, how many times you ask that other person. But it's also collaborative, and everyone at that stage in their career is looking for their collaborators. Yeah. And I think that even with a lot of virtual stuff happening now, you can still do that. You can still find people on social media who seem like like-minded people with similar tastes and interests, and begin to network with them. And that's kind of how I found a lot of my work. My sort of, I'm not a very kind of forward person, and I'm not a natural networker, and I'm probably an introvert, in denial, maybe. But I remember a great piece of advice that my first boss, Becky Mark Lawson, gave me was when we were at a networking event, that everyone in the room is about 2 or 3 rungs down the ladder from where they'll tell you they are. And it suddenly kind of took all the air out of the room for me, and I could speak to all of these people because I knew they were all kind of lying about how successful they are. And I think that knowing that was really helpful, and I've carried that forward in kind of my approach to networking, of just getting to know people as human beings first, not as potential collaborators and potential employers, you know, but a human connection makes you much more memorable, I think.
100%. I think like I, you know, did a lot of the kind of networking drinks and things like that when, all of those things when I was kind of first starting out, and I would always gravitate to people who I was having like a really authentic experience with. And I think, you know, I've been fortunate that the freelance work that I've done, like the kind of for screenwriting thing, I kind of, it's sort of been word of mouth recommendations, which is more and more what it becomes. Like, you know, it's really hard to get into, but once you're kind of in it, I think then the ball starts to roll and people start to know who you are. And also because writers have nice experiences with you. And, you know, I won't be everyone's favorite script editor, but I know that there are writers who do speak highly of me. And so that I think then does help. But authenticity is absolutely the key. I feel like, you know, the bedrock of my networking experiences has been like, I'm going to go into this space and be as much of myself as I can be, and find people who are doing the same.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we have to be honest about how exclusionary development still is as a pocket of the industry. I mean, I remember when I first moved to London from Sheffield, where I grew up, I met an exec who I will not name at a film festival, and he invited me to the company offices for a coffee and a chat about my career, which felt like, you know, fresh off the bus, my career's made. And I sat in his office and he asked me if I came from a wealthy family, and I said no, and he said, well, then you should give up on a career in development, which is not wonderful advice to give a person. And then he encouraged me to get a job as a cinema manager, which is, you know, a legitimate job, and no insult to anyone who is a cinema manager, but not what I was there to talk to him about. And it just felt like a door slamming very firmly in my face not long after I came here. And people have still said stuff like that to me kind of in the last couple of years, that, you know, there's a certain type of person, and I'm a white man. You know, my proximity to that certain type of person is probably a lot greater than a lot of people who want to do this job. But it can be incredibly exclusionary, and you can be shocked when you suddenly discover who a person's parents are, and how they got the credits that they have, and all of that kind of thing. And I don't want to mislead anyone that those barriers aren't still there, because they absolutely are. But I think that's why finding people at your level to work with and collaborate with is important, because the people 10 rungs up the ladder probably aren't looking for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, you know, you make such an important point. And like, I think, you know, I remember having quite a clear moment a year or so ago where I was like, God, I'm doing the thing. Like, I'm doing the thing that I really wanted to be doing. And like, I'm so glad that I'm getting to do it and someone is paying me to do it, because there was a period of time where it was hard. And I think, yeah, we don't want to make it sound all kind of doom and gloom, but I think it's important to say that it isn't a particularly easy path to pick, because a lot of people want to do it.
Yeah.
And, you know, the film industry as a whole has a lot of challenges and areas that could do with finessing and opening up and all of these development words. But it is possible to get into. And I think, you know, it's just about kind of keeping at it. And I think that is the thing that I notice kind of consistently with people, is that it's like, it's a numbers game. You've got to have a lot of chats, and people are very, very willing normally to give you their time. Obviously, you know, it's within reason, but like, I always try and chat to people if I can, even if it's just for kind of 15 minutes, and be like, oh yeah, cool. And then you do think about them when you see jobs kind of coming up, and you go, oh, actually, I've got this CV back here from someone. And that's kind of how it works. I would recommend kind of joining as many sort of like Facebook film-centric sort of networking groups, because most of my jobs I've gotten through Facebook, like, which is wild. It's like the only thing I still use Facebook for. And it like, the power of social media in that way is brilliant, because it does allow access to, if you know where to look for various Facebook groups, literally searching like film and TV in London, and like film and TV production, film and TV like script editing forum, those sorts of things. Add yourself to those. That's where jobs get posted, because people want to help people get access to. And, you know, whenever we have work, we post them in those spaces, because we want people to not just be waiting for someone to tap on their shoulder and go, you know, this job's around here, because that can happen. So, yeah.
I'm going to start dipping into audience questions, just because we're already running out of time, and
wow.
There are quite a few. And I know earlier we spoke about kind of not just being a service provider and wanting to come on as soon as possible. And someone's asked whether a writer can approach a script editor with an unfinished draft. Do you kind of like being brought on as early as like treatment stage and working with someone on that, or is it kind of, I want to see a complete first draft only?
You can come on at literally any stage. Like, it is the most flexible part of this. Like, it depends what they want from you, I think, and what they are hoping the dynamic will be. I think some places and some people want script editors to like literally fix scripts, and that's like not something that they should be doing. There should be kind of guidance, support and opening up, but they can't come in and rewrite, or they shouldn't anyway. And then other places, you know, really want that help from the kind of ground up. And I think with writers, it depends. I think you've got to be careful who you listen to notes from, is something that I would say to new writers particularly. And it's a difficult one, because you want script editors to get practice. But I think before script editors are working with writers, they need to have read a lot of scripts. Like, I had read a lot of scripts before I got in a room with a writer. And I could have read more, and I wish I'd read more. And I still want to read more. You know, I've read like thousands of scripts, and I still feel like I'm learning so much all the time. And there's still more shows that you can have seen. So I think with a writer, I think doing a bit of due diligence, even if that's just having a conversation with someone and gauging, you know, do they have a relatively large range of references of film and TV that they've seen? They don't have to have everything, because it's not possible. But I think that's kind of important. And then, you know, getting a sense that you're sort of creatively aligned, and then kind of trusting their notes, because sometimes bad notes can really hurt a project.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there are projects where where I've been approached and felt it's too early for this particular project to have a script. But there are also projects I've joined super early, like before a treatment even exists, that I've loved working on, getting writers to that stage. So it's about what suits, absolutely, and what a writer needs. And sometimes a writer needs a second opinion and somebody to throw ideas at to get a treatment or a first draft or whatever it is. An unfinished draft is an interesting place to be, because there's a question as to why you can't finish it. And if anything else exists, is there a story outline? Is there a treatment that we can fall back on? But it's not a no by any means.
And then obviously a big part of your job is kind of this navigating of human relationships and just how to communicate with each other. And someone's asked kind of what happens when when there's a director in the mix as well, and you've got like the writer, the director and the script editor all having conversations about how to make the story better. You know, how do you make that a kind of healthy relationship essentially?
It's just part of the job, I think. Like, you've just got to find a way to do it.
Yeah,
you know?
there's a like deep in screenwriting Twitter, there was a meme of a car that was like 3 different cars welded together, and it was like when the exec and the producer and the director have all had a pass on the script or whatever. There's some truth in that, as nerdy as it is to find that hilarious. But it's back to kind of that idea of being a barrier and a conduit. Like, I don't enjoy a producer being in every development meeting. Director kind of feel the same way if there's a director attached, like in and out. But the writer is always paramount for me. So I always want them to have the space alone without a note giver actively giving notes when they're being vulnerable. But I also don't love a writer ever seeing notes from a commissioner. You know, I would like to be able to filter them first, because, you know, as I said, execs have so many projects and they're very busy and they don't have the time to be gentle often. They just know what they need to get this project across the line, and it's there or it's not. And so they'll tell you when it's not. And the benefit of having a script editor is to read between the kind of bluntness of some of those notes and find what they really need. Like, I always see every single time there's a set of notes on a first draft, it's too long. That never means it's too long, because it's usually like 100 pages, which is an acceptable length, but it means you're not earning your 100 pages. Yeah. But if a note goes to a writer and they're just told it's too long, they'll just start cutting. And that's not the value of that note.
Lily, are you okay if we move on to another question, just to try and get through as many as possible? It's quite tangential, but it's come up a few times, so I do want to address it. But people are wondering what the difference between a script editor and supervisor is. And I know they're really different roles, so I just kind of want to clear up the myth that you've never transcended from editing to them being a supervisor on set. That's nothing that you've done.
No, they're completely separate jobs. If I'm going to be completely honest, even though I have produced, I'm still not entirely sure what a script supervisor does.
I mean, I can very quickly, I just want to relay, because it has come up about 4 times. So I just want to very quickly relay, like, the script supervisor is there to kind of check the script and make sure that what is happening in that scene, and, you know, that the setups are right. And then if you're going back to the same scene the next day, that where you left off and everything that you did the day before. Yeah, kind of, exactly, continuity.
That you don't cross the line and the camera and all that. Like, it's a hard job. I don't envy script supervisors.
No, it's not something I could do. I can see how there are similarities in that there is like in the way that you kind of read a script, you have to be conscious of continuity and where people are and all of those sorts of things. But it's very much not. I mean, script editors do go on set for TV. Their production script editors it's a different thing. I'm not a production script editor. I'm a development script editor or a development editor. But production script editors can come on once something has been green lit, or, you know, earlier stages. But normally that will be the person who will then work with the writer, and they will process the rapid incoming of notes that come with the production, which means, like, you know, someone's off sick, you've got to find a way to kind of cut maybe one person out of a scene, or if you've
We
got
can't afford the car anymore.
Exactly, you've got to change location quickly, you've got to do all these things, and so that helps. They do have a creative oversight, definitely, but they probably won't have been the ones who sat in the writer's room or sat in the early conversations. They come on and they kind of take over, as it were, do that. But that's another set script job that isn't set script supervision.
And then something that occurred to me when I was reading out your bios was that you kind of work across a range of projects and a range of mediums. And one of the questions here is that, like, what is the difference? And is there a big divide between editing for kind of film, short film, TV, and even, I guess, theatre? Like, how do you kind of juggle the different needs of those different mediums?
I think, yes, I think the core of story is very similar. You talk about character and structure and pace and tone and premise and all of them, but the form does dictate a lot about the way that you tell a story. I mean, if you think in kind of very basic terms, if you've got to stretch a story over 10 episodes, you need to generate a hell of a lot more material than you do for a film. And that isn't to say, you know, that one's better or worse. I love working across both, and that's like my favorite thing, but they are very different landscapes. And you take a lot of those same skills. I haven't ever worked in theatre, so I can't speak to theatre. Jack, have you?
No, don't know that I could. But yeah, I do think it's funny because television, I mean, there's a lot more official development time for TV and more money to actively develop a project. But kind of the way the UK first features landscape kind of works, and I do work on a lot of first features, is, you know, you'll get your small piece of money for a writer to do their first treatment or take that treatment to draft, and they'll get a small bit of money for their script editor. So I don't mean to sound diminishing by saying small, but it's not huge money for writers in features. And then they will write that draft and submit it back to their commissioner, and they'll wait maybe 3 months to be told whether they can write another one. But you have to hold on to that story in your mind as much as they are, because you have to be ready to hit the ground running as well when the commissioners say yes, go to, you know, do draft 2 or whatever. So you're carrying around an awful lot of story in your head, even when you're not actively developing those projects or being paid to develop them, because you kind of have to hold on to it in the hope that the writer gets another draft, you know, versus TV, where it's a much more concentrated time. But also there's a difference between, like, I think shorts and features are a natural progression of each other. Like, it's often just you and the one writer, you know, back and forth, like ping pong, knocking this story around. But TV is like, if film is ping pong, TV is like volleyball, because there are so many different voices, and in a way that's really exciting, and it's about keeping the ball up in the air for a long time. So they're both, you know, they're both versions of one another, but they require a slightly different energy, I think.
And I know both of you kind of got quite a lot of experience in shorts, both as script editor, but also as producers. And I'm wondering kind of what you see as the value of working on short films, and whether you recommend that as maybe a way of graduating from script reading to script editing.
I think it can be really, really useful. I think one of the most valuable things about working with people who make short films as someone who works in development or script editing is that you are aware of who the new and exciting talent coming through is. And that is, I would say, one of the big distinctions between working in-house that I probably should have kind of spoken about a bit more, in that I do a lot of looking for projects. I look for writers, I look for for ideas to adapt, I look for all different ways of kind of putting things together at really, really early stages. Like, sometimes we'll generate an idea and then we'll look for a writer, attach it, and then we'll, you know, do all of that. And so I have to have a good working knowledge of who's exciting and who's upcoming. It's impossible to know everyone, and there'll always be lots of people that you miss. So you don't need to feel like, you know, you need to know everyone, but if you've got those connections with people who've worked on kind of short films from really early things, but there's like a spark of something great in there, then you've got a relationship with someone who at some point is probably going to be leading the industry. And that is, you know, again, we don't want to kind of commodify everything, but, you know, one of my kind of favorite working relationships and collaborators is someone that was a short film that I worked on when I was at the BFI. And that was like, you know, that felt at that time, I was like, oh, I really want to be doing features. I really want to be doing like the big ones. And that, you know, is becoming those things because that relationship came from a really kind of organic place of working together on the small ones.
Yes, and I think there is an expectation also, like a script editor's produced credits are like a drop in the ocean of the work that they've done, inevitably, because of the amount of projects that get developed and never get made is massive. But shorts, there's a kind of stronger guarantee of getting some recognition sooner. And if you find your collaborators working in shorts, you know, a lot of things changed for me when I worked on a short that got a BAFTA nomination. That definitely made people take more notice of my work. I would also say, you know, there's that kind of old adage of just quit your job and do it. And, you know, I absolutely do not advocate for that.
Please don't advocate for that.
Like, do not do that. Keep your job, you know, absolutely keep your job. I spent a long time working for film festivals and doing this on the side. But shorts, you can do on the side, you know, it's a lot of evenings in your pre-production. But you can have a day job and make your short and start to get some recognition. Yeah. And as a script editor, you can have your day job and spend your evenings writing notes for filmmakers and start to get some recognition there too.
Definitely.
And then we have an anonymous question, which always means they're slightly spicy. And this is to do with money. So to frame it kind of maybe more softly, how did you go about kind of setting your rate or finding out what like the industry standard was in terms of what you should be charging for your services?
No one will tell you. No one will tell you.
I was going to say, like, I just asked people and people would be like, not really say. And so I mean, undercut myself for a long time, I think. And then, you know, I'm now in-house, and so it's a different conversation. But I think it's really hard. It's really hard to work that out.
And I think that's definitely difficult for people from like working class backgrounds to not undercut yourself and to take the money that you're owed. But I feel like very lucky that I now have an agent who deals with the money. Not big, and they do much more than that, but people who are happy to ask for your fee is really great. But I think recognizing that you do deserve to be paid for your work is really important. And I think that you can start low, and when you've got a couple of credits, you can slap an extra 50 on, you know, and build up. I think that that's a legitimate thing to do. And I don't think, as I say, that people should work for free forever.
Definitely.
And I think that, yeah, ask people what their rates are. And, you know, not everyone's rate is the same for every project. I would also say, like, there's, you know, I will take a hit if it's a project I really want to work on that doesn't have any money.
Yeah, I was just about to say, and also, like, you know, I've got some great experience, but I'm obviously, you know, I'm not 30 years into a career, and I will charge more when I am, and that's just part of it. And like, I think you do scale yourself accordingly, and as you say, for projects you love. But I think it is worth noting that you cannot really haggle on script reading when it is with companies, because they are fixed and set rates. And yes, they are low, but that is literally like, it's a volume thing. And the quicker you get, like, I remember when I first started freelance script reading, the amount of money I was making for how long it took me was pittance. And, you know, I was dyslexic, and, you know, I'm dyslexic, but it took me longer to kind of get through things in the beginning. And now I've worked out all different kinds of systems to do it faster, and so the pound, you know, the bang per buck is better. But you can't really haggle in those situations, but you can with script editing when the time comes.
Yeah.
And then there's someone here that's interested in the admin side of things, surprisingly. But Jack, you kind of mentioned that, yeah, it's not all just understanding of stories. So can you maybe both delve into a little bit more of the knowledge or skills that are required in order to do your job proficiently?
Yes, I mean, you have to be an excellent, and I don't mean this as a creative writer, you have to be a very good writer. Like, I think that you have to I don't know quite how to phrase this. Nobody should be spotting your errors, I think, is important. You're there to pick up on the errors, not anybody else. So, you know, it's a lot of writing of notes, but there's also a lot of sort of generation of all the additional materials that surround a project, whether that is treatments or whatever else it might be to get something into production. Yeah, that's a terrible answer to that question.
No, I'd say you've got to be like a big fan of an email. You've got to be good on your emails and responsive, and that's a big kind of part of the admin. I'd say Final Draft does kick in at some point. Being able to use Final Draft is important, not when you're script reading. but when you are script editing, particularly in TV, you'll need to know how Final Draft works. You can work out a lot of it from YouTube. So
Yeah, God bless YouTube tutorial.
yeah, exactly. What other things? Being good with kind of research is really, really important. I think you've got to be able to and have a real interest in it. I think there's a lot of deep diving that can be done, and sometimes if you're part of a bigger system, there'll be someone who does a lot of the research and passes it to you. But a lot of my kind of the beginning years of me working in development was loads of research, and that was really, really helpful for me. And I suppose, can you call it admin? No, but you like reading and watching a lot of stuff. And I say that with very like big red warnings that you do not have to have seen anything, everything. You just have to have enough references to pull from and be comfortable talking about it and to stay relatively on top of it.
I think we have time for a couple more questions, and I'm really sorry that we're not going to get through all of them, but Max has asked regarding dyslexia, which Lily, you just brought up. Are there any tips that you can offer for kind of getting through scripts at a speedier rate?
Yeah, so it's just about, I think with me, I sped up with time. The more scripts I read, the more I got used to reading them a certain way. So I think when it comes to doing notes, that's when you have to apply systems. Like I will write something and then I will leave it. I will not send people notes the day I've written them, because I will have to reread them and check for mistakes. Grammarly, if you can afford Grammarly Premium, is really, really helpful. I think, lots of rereading. Also, taking step back and taking breaks is really important for me. I can't work for too long at a period of time, and I must say, like, my dyslexia is not really, really bad. It's something I struggled with a lot in school, but like has gotten better the more I've read and the older I've become. So it's just a matter of practice for me and taking breaks and rereading.
And then Jack, coming to you, because you mentioned that you started out in kind of festivals and worked many other kind of jobs before moving into script editing. Is that something that maybe you would advise because you're getting a sense of audience and who goes to see stuff? Or?
Yeah, I mean, advise maybe not. Like if you've got a straight pathway, you take it, but it's definitely added more feathers to my bow. No, strings to my bow, feathers to my cap. Like I have definitely a more like a bird's eye view of the industry in the UK than maybe a lot of other script editors have, because I have worked for talent development in the BFI and for BAFTA and worked in festivals, so know distribution and exhibition landscapes, and have met a load of people doing that, who then also find out further down the line that I script edit too, or that I can, even if they are not somebody who might employ me, if I can additionally advise a writer or director that I'm working with on who the best casting director for this project would be, or who should shoot it, that's really valuable knowledge I can bring to the table that's kind of informal and you can't really quantify it, but it's stuff I know. But it's always good to know stuff. Like the more things that you can pluck out of your like Mary Poppins bag for people, the better. Definitely.
If I could go back, I'd work in a theatre as front of house. That would be the most useful job I can think of, that gets you access to new writing, new talent, and you get to watch things. So yeah.
Amazing. You've actually ended up answering another question, because someone said, what would you do differently? So that's amazing. To wrap it up, I would love to know if there is a film or TV series that has come out in maybe the last year that you would recommend as a particularly kind of great example of skilled writing.
I think that's so hard, but go ahead, Jack. Yeah.
Well, BBC Writers' Room put all the scripts for The Northwater online the other day, which I know, I mean, I feel like I'm the only person who's obsessed with that show, but the writing is great because it's adaptation, which is really difficult, and it captures a lot of the kind of brutality of the novel, but in a perfectly formatted screenplay. It reads for screen the same way the novel reads for literature. And it's incredibly evocative writing, but with a real economy for language.
Great. I just watched a film called Shiva Baby, which is just so fun, and it's fresh in my mind. But I found there was a real kind of authorial voice with it. The comedy was really great, and I just felt fresh and really contained. Like it was an intelligent film to make for someone who is making, like, an early filmmaker who needs to make something on not an enormous amount of money. I was like, that's a really good way to go. And yeah, I thought that was really good.
I concur, both amazing recommendations. I'm going to have a quick plug actually, because a lot of the Q&As in the box are about kind of writing and maybe advice for early stage writers. BFI Network Film Hub Southeast are launching a podcast next Wednesday, 2nd of February. And the first episode is all about writing. We have interviews with screenwriters, script editors, lecturers. So I'll share that around in like the newsletter and our comms, so keep your eye out for that, because I reckon that will answer quite a lot of the questions that we didn't get around to today. Lily, Jack, thank you so much for your time. I was really looking forward to it and it really didn't disappoint. I think you were
Thank you for having us.
full of wisdom.
This has been great.
Thank you so much everyone for attending. I hope you got something out of it. Check out our comms for kind of upcoming events, but I will let you get back to your evenings. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Lily. Bye everyone.
Bye.
See ya.